High in the thin air of the Peruvian Andes, a wall rises from the green plateau, built from stones so massive that a single block weighs more than a fully grown blue whale. The joints between these stones are so perfectly fitted that after more than 500 years of earthquakes, you still cannot slide a sheet of paper between them. In the green valley of eastern Lebanon, 3 single blocks of limestone sit at the base of an ancient temple, each one weighing over 800 tons. They were quarried, shaped, and somehow lifted into place, and to this day, no engineer can explain exactly how it was done. This mystery remains unexplained, and on a forgotten hillside in eastern China, an unfinished monolith lies abandoned in the dirt, partially carved from the bedrock itself. If it had ever been moved, it would have been the largest single stone ever cut by human hands. It weighs 16,000 tons. It was never moved. These 3 sites sit on 3 different continents, separated by oceans, by thousands of years, and by entirely different cultures. They share no language, no religion, no architectural tradition. And yet all 3 of them defy a simple, obvious rule of physics. They should not be possible to build with the tools the historical record says their builders had. In this video, we are going to look at these 3 monuments, what they actually are, who supposedly built them, and the very specific engineering questions that mainstream archaeology still cannot fully answer. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden chapters of human history with us, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Now grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's begin with the highest of the 3. If you stand on the high plateau just above the city of Cusco in southern Peru, you will find yourself in front of one of the most baffling structures on Earth. The walls of Saksaywaman zigzag across the green hillside in 3 massive terraced tiers, stretching for nearly a quarter of a mile. The air up here is thin. You are over 11,000 feet above sea level, and the wind carries the scent of cold stone and dry grass. The view alone is breathtaking, but it is the stones themselves that stop you in your tracks. Most mainstream history books will tell you these walls were built in the 15th century by the Inca Emperor Pachacuti as a fortress and ceremonial center for the imperial capital. And the Inca certainly used the site, expanded it, and made it part of their empire. But there is growing evidence that the deepest foundation stones were already in place long before Pachacuti was born, likely laid by an earlier Andean culture known as the Quilca, sometime around 1100 AD. The Inca, in other words, may have inherited the most impressive part of the structure. And the truly impossible part is what they inherited. The lowest tier of the wall is built from boulders of andesite, one of the hardest, densest volcanic rocks on the planet. Many of these foundation stones weigh between 100 to 200 tons each. The single largest block is estimated at over 300 tons. To put that into perspective, a fully loaded 18-wheel truck weighs about 40 tons. The largest stone at Saksaywaman weighs roughly the same as 8 of those trucks stacked together. The builders did not simply pile these boulders into a rough wall. They carved each one into a unique, irregular polygonal shape, with up to 12 sides per stone, and then locked them together so precisely that the joints are still flush after centuries of seismic activity. There is no mortar. There is no cement. There is nothing holding these stones together except the perfect geometric fit of one impossible shape against another. To understand why this matters, you have to know one thing about Cusco. It sits directly on top of a major fault line. The valley has been hit by devastating earthquakes for as long as records exist. In 1950, a massive quake leveled most of the colonial Spanish buildings in the city. The Saksaywaman walls did not move, The mortarless joints allow the stones to shift slightly during a quake, absorbing the shockwave, then settle back into perfect alignment. It is a deliberate, sophisticated piece of engineering, built to dance with the earth instead of fighting it. This is where the real puzzle begins. The Inca, by all archaeological records, did not have iron tools. They did not have steel. They did not have the wheel in any practical sense. They had no draft animals capable of pulling multi-ton loads. Llamas could carry a sack of grain, not a 300-ton boulder. The mainstream explanation is that Inca workers used smaller, harder hammerstones to slowly pound the andesite into shape, and then dragged the blocks up the mountain using ropes, wooden rollers, and pure human muscle. That explanation is plausible for the smaller upper-tier stones. For the foundation blocks, it falls apart. The andesite quarry is several miles away, across a river valley and up a steep grade. To drag a 300-ton block over that terrain with rope and muscle would require thousands of coordinated workers, and the ropes themselves would snap long before the stone reached the top. There are in fact several massive stones scattered along the ancient transport routes that the locals call piedras cansadas that never made it. The hauling crews abandoned them where they fell, and then there is the carving itself. Some sections of the wall show stones with strange, almost glassy edges, a texture geologists call vitrification. That process only forms when rock is exposed to extremely high temperatures. A handful of independent researchers have suggested the ancient builders may have used some form of localized heat to soften the stone before fitting it. Others propose the use of acidic plant extracts. Mainstream archaeology rejects both ideas and points out that the vitrified patches are limited and could have other explanations. The debate is ongoing. What is not in dispute is that somehow 300-ton blocks of one of the hardest rocks on Earth were quarried, carved into precise 12-sided polygons, transported across miles of broken terrain, and locked together with sub-millimeter precision by a culture that, on paper, did not have the tools to do any of it. If the Andes were the only place on Earth where this kind of engineering appeared, we could write it off as a uniquely brilliant culture pushing its limits. But the same story repeats itself almost exactly on the other side of the world. About 8,000 miles from the Andes, in the Bekaa Valley of eastern Lebanon, sits a small town built around the ruins of a vast Roman temple complex. Today the site is called Baalbek. In Roman times, it was Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and it was home to the largest temple ever built in the entire Roman Empire. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek was bigger than the Pantheon in Rome, bigger than the Parthenon in Athens, and built on a scale that even the Romans rarely attempted. The columns alone stood over 70 feet tall. But the Romans are not the mystery here. The real mystery is what the Romans built their temple on top of. Beneath the Temple of Jupiter, supporting the entire massive structure, sits a stone platform made of enormous limestone blocks. Most of these blocks weigh several hundred tons each. In one section of the western retaining wall, 3 specific stones sit in a row that have for over 2,000 years baffled every engineer who has ever stood in front of them. They are called the trilithon, meaning simply 3 stones. Each of these 3 blocks weighs approximately 800 tons. They are roughly 64 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. And they are perfectly aligned, fitted together with millimeter precision, sitting around 20 feet above ground level. To put 800 tons in perspective, it is roughly the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747, 3 of them sitting on top of each other. Modern construction cranes capable of lifting that kind of weight in a single piece are extremely rare. The largest mobile cranes in the world today can lift around 1,200 tons under perfect conditions, on flat ground, with extensive counterweights and hydraulic support. Lifting a single 800-ton block 20 feet into the air and setting it down with sub-inch precision next to two more identical blocks is a task that pushes modern engineering to its absolute limits. The mainstream explanation is that the Romans built the platform in the 1st century AD using massive wooden cranes, capstans, and enormous teams of labourers. And there is solid evidence the Romans were, in fact, capable of moving very heavy stones. Roman engineering manuals describe sophisticated lifting devices. They built remarkable structures all over their empire. But the largest stones the Romans verifiably moved elsewhere, at the obelisks of Rome for example, or at other major construction sites, top out at around 300 to 500 tons. The trilithon stones at Baalbek are nearly twice that weight. Roman texts make no specific mention of moving stones this massive. There are no inscriptions claiming credit for the platform, no carvings depicting the lift, nothing. And then there is the stone that didn't make it. About 1,000 yards away from the temple complex, in a quarry on the edge of town, a fourth massive block lies partially buried in the earth. It was carved out of the bedrock and nearly fully shaped, but never moved. It is known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, and it weighs approximately 1,000 tons. In 2014, a German archaeological team discovered an even larger block beneath it, still partially attached to the bedrock, that one is estimated at around 1,650 tons. These are, without question, the largest worked stone blocks ever cut by human hands anywhere on Earth. This is where the alternative perspective comes in. Some independent researchers, and a number of Lebanese local traditions, argue that the trilithon platform was not built by the Romans at all. They argue it was already there when the Romans arrived, and that the Romans, recognizing that they could not have built the platform themselves, simply built their temple on top of it. This is the same pattern we have seen at other ancient sites, the inherited foundation. There is no scientific consensus on this. Mainstream archaeology continues to attribute the platform to Roman engineers. But the awkward fact remains that the trilithon stones do not appear in any Roman record, do not match the size of any other Roman lift, and sit beneath, not within, the Roman construction. Whoever built it, the trilithon platform raises the same fundamental question as Saksaywaman. The historical record says it should not be possible. The physical reality says it is. And the only way to resolve the contradiction is to either revise our understanding of ancient engineering capability or admit that we still do not fully know who built parts of our own past. Our final stop is in eastern China, on a quiet forested hillside near the city of Nanjing. Here, in an abandoned imperial quarry called Yangshan, sits the single most ambitious block of stone ever attempted by human hands, and it was abandoned before it could be moved. The Yangshan quarry was opened in the early 15th century on the orders of the Yongle Emperor, the third emperor of China's Ming dynasty. The Yongle Emperor was an ambitious, restless ruler who built the Forbidden City, commissioned the famous treasure fleets of Admiral Zheng He, and wanted to honor his father, the founder of the dynasty, with the largest stone monument in Chinese history. The plan was to carve 3 colossal blocks of stone, a base, a body, and a top, and assemble them into a single stele, an upright stone pillar nearly as tall as a 40-story building at his father's tomb on the outskirts of Nanjing. The base block alone, still sitting in the quarry today, was carved from the surrounding limestone bedrock to a length of nearly 500 feet, about 1.5 football fields. It is 52 feet thick. The body of the stele was planned to be over 200 feet long. The top piece, intended as a decorative cap, was carved to a length of over 170 feet. Together, If assembled, the monument would have stood roughly 400 feet tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty. The combined weight of the three pieces is estimated at approximately 30,000 tons. The base piece alone weighs around 16,000 tons. To say that again clearly, 16,000 tons. That is roughly 20 times heavier than the trilithon stones at Baalbek, and over 50 times heavier than the largest stones at Saksaywaman. And here is the part that almost no one outside of China talks about. The blocks were not designed by some lost ancient culture using mysterious technology. They were commissioned in 1405 AD by a fully literate, fully documented imperial bureaucracy with detailed records of the project that survived to this day. The Ming court genuinely believed they were going to move these stones. Thousands of laborers were assigned to the quarry. The blocks were carved out of the bedrock to near completion. Then, at some point during the project, the imperial engineers did the math, looked at the stones, and realized they could not move them. There was no method available in 1405 to transport 16,000 tons of stone over land. The project was quietly abandoned. The blocks were left exactly where they sat. They are still there today, partially attached to the bedrock, slowly weathering in the rain. Now here is why this matters. The Yangshan stones were attempted by a civilization that was, at the time, arguably the most technologically advanced on Earth. The Ming dynasty had cast iron, steel tools, sophisticated cranes, gunpowder, and a vast organized labor force. They had documented engineering manuals. They had naval architecture capable of building ships nearly 500 feet long. And with all of that, they could not move 16,000 tons of stone, and they were honest enough to admit it and walk away. Compare that to the stones at Baalbek and Saksaywaman, which are smaller, but were apparently moved successfully by cultures that on paper had far less technology. The Inca had no iron, no draft animals, no wheels. The pre-Roman builders at Baalbek, whoever they were, left no engineering manuals at all. And yet somehow those stones got moved. The Yangshan engineers, with all their advantages, gave up. The earlier builders, with apparently fewer tools, did not. Gave up. This is what makes Yangshan such a strange and important data point. It is not a mystery in itself. The historical record is clear about who started the project and why it was abandoned, but it is the closest thing we have to a control experiment. It tells us very precisely what was not possible in 1405 AD with the best available technology, which means that whatever moved the stones at Baalbek or carved the foundations of Saksaywaman was operating outside the limits the Ming engineers thought existed. 3 monuments, 3 continents, 3 completely different cultures, separated by oceans and by centuries. And in all 3 cases, the same fundamental contradiction. The stones are real. You can stand in front of them today. You can touch the joints at Saksaywaman, walk the length of the trilithon at Baalbek, climb on the abandoned base at Yangshan. They are not legends. They are not myths. They are physical objects, mapped and measured by modern surveyors, and the simple act of moving them remains, in many cases, beyond what we can confidently explain. The mainstream answer is that these were extraordinary feats of organized human labor, that thousands of workers, given enough time and enough rope, can accomplish anything. And in some cases, that explanation may well be correct. But the Yangshan quarry, abandoned by an empire with iron and steel because the math did not work, suggests there are real, hard limits to what coordinated human muscle can do. Which means that somewhere, in the gap between what we think the ancients had and what they apparently accomplished, there is a piece of the story we are still missing. Maybe it is a lost technique. Maybe it is a forgotten tool. Maybe the answer is simply that ancient labor forces were larger and more organized than we have credited them for. Or maybe it is something stranger, the inherited foundation, the older builder, the technology that did not survive the collapse of whatever civilization first developed it. We do not know. The stones are not telling, but they are still standing. And as long as they are, the question stays open. Tell us in the comments which of these three sites you find the most baffling: Saksaywaman, Baalbek, or Yangshan, and we will reply to our favorite theories. If you made it this far, hit subscribe so you do not miss our next deep dive. There is a video coming up soon on a sunken pyramid off the coast of Japan that you are not going to want to miss. Until next time, stay curious.